listen.
Never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Getting on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
And welcome to another edition of West Coast Bias presented by Baseball Isn't Boring. It's the World Series edition. But real quick, before we get into the World Series, wanted to dive into a few different facets. Yesterday was heavy with emotion with the passing of Fernando Valenzuela, and now we're diving into the World Series stuff. And so I was thinking to myself, man, who should we have on that we could chat to about this stuff that kind of covers it all? And it's the great and powerful Chad Jennings of The Athletic was the perfect person I could think of. And Chad, thank you for making some time and joining me today.
Hey, it's no problem. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. So let's start there. The Fernando thing happened, and I just kind of wanted to hear from your perspective because you're on the other coast, the left coast, right? So it's a little different to how the perception is of Fernando is over there. Talk about kind of what the emotion was on that side of the country, but also the kind of the impact that Fernando has also had on that side of the country historically.
Well, look, I mean, he's a massive figure. I was born in '79. So I was I was very small for Fernandomania. I don't really, I have no personal memory of it, except to say that as I was getting into baseball and starting to understand it, 86, 87, 88, 89, he was still a thing, right? Like my earliest memories of baseball, it might not be the tidal wave that was Fernando's, debut, but I remember Fernando as one of the guys in the National League, right? He was so I think I have at least some feel for, probably not really do I have a feel for what it was, the impact it had in Mexico and things like that? Of course not. I don't have that perspective, but I remember him as a huge name in the sport. And then as I've gotten older, to come to better appreciate the impact he had, and he was around, right? I mean, you see him in Dodger Stadium. Yeah, I mean, it's especially coming into a Dodgers World Series, the impact of that loss heading into this series. It's a giant loss, and also though I don't know the right way to phrase it, but it's going to be special being able to celebrate him tomorrow, right? Like that's going to be a part of the start of this World Series at Dodger Stadium, and I think that's going to be pretty special.
No, and again, the reason I ask is it's what the show's called West Coast Bias, right? So we are aware on this side of the country of the impact that Fernando's had. Obviously, for me culturally, also big too, because I'm Mexican, right? And as a Mexican, that affects a lot of different kind of facets of things. So to me, it's fascinating just because there's all this kind of conversation that goes into, why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? And then there's we had on the show I used to previously do with Bleed Los podcast, the legend Dale Murphy had no idea that Fernando's number wasn't even retired by the Dodgers. So it's one of those things where it's always kind of fascinating when you hear kind of the perception of somebody else outside of the silo, just to kind of see what that is.
Yeah. And my perception of him is really more from almost from childhood, right? I mean, to me, he's still just one of those giant figures as I was coming into a baseball fan as a kid in the 80s. Just his name rings as one of the massive figures in the sport at the time. And I think it's taken me, as I've gotten older then to, sort of understand, one, the impact that he had in the beginning, and then, the talk about whether whether it's limited to the West Coast, and I would guess it is to some extent, just because the peak of him is so heavily in those years in his 20s when he was with the Dodgers. That's sort of where the impact is going to be most heavily felt.
And the irony of a lot of things, right, is he passes away at the young age of 63, and then Game 6 of this World Series could fall on what would have been his 64th birthday.
Wow.
And then also the irony of he pitched a complete game against these very Yankees. Well, not this roster, but the Yankees
Yeah.
in 1981. And so it's kind of weird. Baseball is a funny thing, right? Like it's a beautiful thing and a funny thing at the same time.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like it's going to be neat to celebrate him because there's going to be this is such a wonderful opportunity to sort of relive some of that and to discuss it and to put if he has fallen off of the map somewhere, if there is if the East Coast doesn't appreciate him as much, there are going to be eyeballs here and a chance to talk about it and show it, and I'm sure there will be a lot made of it, and there should be. You hope that that's going to be a fairly powerful moment to sort of put him back in the spotlight again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And looking ahead to this World Series, Game 1, Friday, at Dodger Stadium, there's a lot of storylines, right? It's the power, the two powerful entities, right? The two evil empires, as some people have put it. And then just even on the rosters as a whole, there's storylines. I wanted to start with one that you're a little more versed with on that side. And it's the story that's coming out of the word that's coming out is that Nestor Cortez is willing to kind of risk it all to pitch in this series. It sounds like he's got a forearm injury, potentially UCL, might need some Tommy John, something to that effect. Either way, that in itself is insane, but that's what you got to do if you're trying to go out there and get a chip. Let's start there. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I think some of it is, one, it speaks to what the moment is, right? I mean, it's an opportunity to pitch in the World Series. I'd also wouldn't be very surprised to find out that the Yankees are looking at this and want another lefty, particularly a lefty who can give them some innings if they had to. That could play a role in this team, especially if Freddie Freeman's going to be able to play and be impactful. The idea of just another left-hander has to be pretty helpful for them.
No, and I think often of the meme, right? Of like you see it sometimes with like LeBron wearing the do-rag with the cigarette, and it's like lefty, righty, doesn't matter. I'll take him out. And I think of that with Otani, right? Because with Otani, it doesn't matter. Lefty, righty,
sure,
could be ambidextrous, doesn't matter. Like he's just gonna hit. So as far as the Otani factor, kind of looking at it in the New York sense, how is that being interpreted out there? How's that being looked at? I'm actually just really curious.
You talking about with Cortez?
Just in general.
In general with him. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like you were saying, it's the left, right doesn't matter. It's probably similar to Soto, right? Like left, right's not. It's part of the power of this World Series is the top of each lineup is so potent that, I mean, you're going to try to find some way to mix and match, but mostly you're trying to probably play matchups, just trying to minimize the bottom of the order. That's at the top, whether it's, Judge and Soto or Shohei and Betts or whatever, like you just hold on and hope for the best, right? I mean, there is no way to match up those guys. I don't think that talking about wanting a lefty, I don't think they're necessarily that's the Yankees going, if a lefty's the way to beat Otani. I think you're just gonna hope you throw the best stuff you have at him and that no one's on base at the time you face him. But I mean, there's that's the heavyweight side of it, right? I mean, it's Yankees, Dodgers, the two probably biggest franchises in the sport, and happening at a time when they have, I don't know, I would say arguably, but maybe even inarguably, the two biggest names in the sport in Judge and Otani. So that's huge, and that's why I think this is, for Major League Baseball, it's such an interesting matchup and such a huge opportunity for them to really showcase the stars, and because the stars don't get much bigger than those two.
I have a theory, and it may be an unpopular theory, but I just have a theory. So I think the pressure's on evenly on both teams, right? Because the Dodgers went out and spent ungodly amounts of money on this roster, deferred a bunch of money for Otani. There's been, even scrutiny on that front. The gambling scandal, all these things kind of just entangled in, right? And then the Yankees, you hear Yankee fan that's been clamoring to fire Aaron Boone, right? And they went out and spent all that money on Judge. They're going to have to spend a bunch of money on Soto if they want to keep him. They went out and assembled kind of their form of the Avengers. Both teams have dealt with injuries along the way. The Dodgers are still dealing with it with Freddie Freeman, Yankees with Nestor Cortez. Like, there's all these different things. But I think the pressure, as far as it goes, is even on them because the Yankees haven't haven't won in a long time. I mean, their last championship was in '09, and as we know, the Yankees clamor for World Series all the time, right? And then the Dodgers, there's still a lot of people out there that are still even calling that championship in 2020 a Mickey Mouse ring. They're still out there trying to prove themselves, do all that things. Am I crazy in thinking of it that way, where the pressure's kind of even keel? And we haven't even gotten to the Dave Roberts side, right? Dave Roberts gets a lot of scrutiny too for the things that he does from Dodger fan as well. I think unfairly, but I digress.
Yeah.
But do you am I looking at that through the right lens, or do you think?
I think you're 100% right. There is the Yankees being the Yankees, spending like they do. The Soto move is an all in. You trade some guys who had an impactful year for San Diego to get 1 year of this guy, and that 1 year has paid off. The target's always on them, and it has been a long time. I mean, they haven't been to the World Series since '09. This is their first pennant since then. But the Dodgers put a target on themselves this offseason, and I don't think it's bad. I'm not among those who thinks this was bad for baseball. The Dodgers went out and spent what they spent, and I think baseball's you got to like it when a team says we're going to invest in our roster and that pays off. I think you want that. I think you want other owners looking at that and going, oh, man, we're going to have to do something here to keep up. I'm not sure that's a bad thing, but it does put a target on them. And you're right. I was saying this earlier that I think especially with the Dodgers and probably to some extent with the Yankees, but especially with the Dodgers because of what they did in the offseason, I think we spent a lot of time this year poking holes in the Dodgers because you go, man, they got so much of it. Is this the best top three of any lineup ever? The amount of money they've put here, the biggest offseason splurge we've ever seen, and they come in with all of this attention. And then, it starts there's the spring training fiasco with Shohei and the betting scandal. And then all of a sudden they need Mookie Betts is going to have to play shortstop. And then Mookie's hurt. And now their entire rotation is hurt. And you just start poking holes at them and they start feeling like they're not as good, right? They were supposed to be this world beater team that's unbelievable. And then as things start falling apart, I think we got in the habit of focusing on the things that were wrong with the Dodgers. The rotations hurt. They didn't have their middle infield was pretty spotty for a while. Center field was a little bit weak. They had guys get banged up. And now you're getting into the playoffs with them and they make it to the World Series. And finally it's an opportunity to go they're not 100%. They're a long way from that with the rotation. But now we get to look at how good they are. And I think that the focus is maybe shifting back with them to less about all the bad things about them. And you're getting a chance to, again, appreciate all the things that are so good about them. And that's Shohei and Mookie at the top. That's Max Muncy working great at bats. That's how good their bullpen has been. The ability to really roll out some arms there, the things they did at the trade deadline that worked to perfection, right? You get Tommy Edman, you get Kopech to give you that stopper in the bullpen. I don't know if they're here without Jack Flaherty. It's you're starting to, again, they are imperfect, and I think their rotation is a concern heading into the World Series. But I think that the focus gets to shift back to there's a reason there was so much attention on these guys in the first place, and they're a very, very good team. And so I think that you're right. Expectations and pressure is on for both of these teams. Their fan bases expect a lot, and the game expects a lot of them. These are organizations that have advantages that other teams just don't have. And so, there's no one's going to cry for them. Even if the Dodgers get beat up in this series and it's because they don't have a rotation, no one's going to cry for them. They could go through all of these injuries and you're going to say, well, you should have had more. I don't know how you have more than what they've gone through, but yeah, you're right. There's a lot of pressure on them, and it's going to be a defining moment for a group of guys either way, either side that wins this, right? If a huge moment for Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman with the Yankees, for a defining moment for Aaron Judge's tenure with the team, right? He's going to be an iconic Yankee anyway, but if he gets a World Series, that cements that. Garrett Cole to some extent, even Rodon. They're big guys that they've brought in, Stanton. But similar thing with the Dodgers. If Shohei makes it to the playoffs for the first time and wins a World Series, that's unbelievable.
Well, and I'm calling this the Vindication Series. And the reason I'm calling it the Vindication Series is, to your point, all those guys you just listed, they're vindicated, right? Like, this is why we paid you the boatloads of money we paid you.
Yeah. Because you're right, that the 2020 series doesn't feel that way. It just doesn't. And maybe it's unfair. But because, I mean, look, they did what they were supposed to do that year. That's just what there was. But it's just different. It's just a different year. And so you're right. That World Series is always going to have it's just going to always look different. It's always going to be talked about differently. But you win this one. And not only win this one, you win this one against the Yankees. And not only you win this one against the Yankees, you win this one against the Yankees when the Yankees have Aaron Judge, when they have Juan Soto, when they have Garrett Cole starting game one. No one can take that one away, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be a big one. And the same for the Yankees. Yankees haven't been there since 2009. Their guys, only 3 guys on their team were even in the minor leagues the last time the Yankees were in the World Series.
Yeah.
You go in and you win this year. And not only win, but you win against the team that spent $1 billion in the offseason. That's a pretty big feather in the cap for those guys, and a real defining moment. If that's the biggest championship in Aaron Judge's career, well, that's a pretty good one to have right at the top of your list, right? If that's the only one he wins, but and I think the Dodgers and Shohei and Mookie and all that, that's a big one.
No, and I think too, I mean, on the Dodger side as well, right? Like again, the pressure is even keeled. There's also a lot more parity in this World Series than I think we've seen in some time, just because you have the top of the lineups that are, I mean, they have superstars, megastars, right? They're there. The bottom halves of those lineups, they're pretty even too. If you really sit down and kind of look at the nuts and bolts of it, really where the biggest question is going to be is the Dodgers rotation. I think and it's a valid question, because at this point, Yamamoto grew up a little bit in that second outing of his. And we saw, I mean, obviously all the pressure in the world is on that guy, because they paid a buttload of money for him too. They brought him over from Japan. He's the 18 over there as well. And he did some learning that day. Jack Flaherty got roughed up in his last outing, but from the reporting, it sounds like he was sick. Not to use an excuse, but if you're sick, you're sick, right? Yeah. But he still got rocked. It doesn't change the fact that he got rocked. The thing I'm the most curious of is both of these teams in their respective series, even though the series for the Yankees was shorter, those were emotionally charged series. They were long series. They grinded out each and every win. I mean, the Guardians, for all that they didn't go down quietly, right? They fought back the entire way. And tip of the cap, by the way, to Stephen Vogt. That guy is doing everything he needs to do to get the most out of his guys, especially in that environment. And that was tough. But I think too, I mean, going into it, everyone's banged up at this time of the year, right? Injuries are just a part of it. It's a long season. So what I wanted to ask you is this: when you look at the two teams, who right now, in my opinion, I don't think there is necessarily a favorite. Do you think there is a favorite as we look at this series?
I was just talking to one of my coworkers about this today. We have to do our picks right in the Athletic, and I struggled with mine because the way this form works out that we fill out, I go by and I click Dodgers as my pick to win, and then there's this box where I have to write why, and I couldn't come up with the right why. Because to me, if I try to logically look at it and really try to analyze it, the strength of the Yankees rotation feels like a difference maker to me. I think I would rather have that rotation than have the Dodgers bullpen, right? I think the Dodgers pen is better than the Yankees pen, or at least has more weapons. Though the Yankees pen has worked really well, and you don't have to use it as much. But that feels like that should be the difference maker. The top of the lineup for each team is really good. I think the Dodgers have a better and more useful bench, but I'm also not sure that's going to matter that much. There aren't a lot of pinch hit opportunities in this series. So I would think logically to me, the Yankees actually having a stronger rotation should feel like the difference maker for me logically, but I still just look at it and think the Dodgers are going to win. So I don't know. It's a hard one for me to sort of justify, who's in the driver's seat here and who I just like gut feel is that I think the Dodgers would be the team I'd pick to win it. But again, if I try to scrutinize it and try to think through why, I think my logic goes the other direction. And maybe that's just the nature of baseball a little bit, right? Like there's that, sometimes it doesn't always play out exactly the way you're thinking it's going to.
No, and baseball is a beautiful game, but sometimes it doesn't make sense, right? Like the logic of this, and I agree with you, it leans towards the Dodgers. And I'm not just saying that as a Dodgers apologist. I'm saying that as just the guy that loves baseball, talks baseball, all that stupid stuff. And even then, the thing where I am intrigued by is it sounds like there's going to be one bullpen game in this series, and it's going to be for the Dodgers, right? And so that game could be the difference too, right? When you sit down and kind of look at the nuts and bolts of it, that could be the difference maker. And if that's the case, that's insane too. But that's just how baseball chalks itself up to be, right? Because the Dodgers are doing this without Glasnow. They're doing this without Clayton Kershaw. And if they had Glasnow, you'd have to give him the edge, but they just don't have him.
Right. Yeah. And doing it with a lesser version of Walker Buehler. Right. Yeah. I mean, although he looked pretty good in his last start, I think only 4 innings. So you're not going to ask a ton out of him, but he did look better. I thought that he made some pitches, at least in that game, that you're like, oh, there's a little bit of vintage Buehler in there, a little bit, moments of it, flashes of it. But yeah, you're right. It also is why, if either one of the top two, if either Flaherty or Yamamoto really shows up this series, that's such a difference maker to them. I think you expect that Cole's going to pitch well. You expect Rodon's going to pitch pretty well. But Clark Schmidt, Luis Heel, like they've got some guys. But man, if at least one of those two Dodgers starters can really give them some length one night and can just give a really strong start in one of the first two, I think that changes a lot, because right now, again, that feels like the weakness. That feels like where the Yankees have the edge. And if they can switch that edge, if just one of those guys really comes out and shoves on a night, I think that shifts things a lot for the Dodgers.
2 more things before I set you loose. Number one, how important is this series for baseball?
I think that they got here is the thing, that they're going to have so many eyeballs on it. Now you hope it's a great series. I mean, I think you always hope it's a great series, but yeah, I don't know that, I don't think baseball necessarily needs, Shohei to hit 4 home runs and Judge to hit 4 home runs, and that Juan Soto bats 400 for the series, and that Mookie Betts throws out 3 runners at the plate or whatever. I don't think it all has to work to perfection where every superstar shows up and is great. But you're already going to get a lot of eyes on it. At least some of those guys are going to have moments that you're going to open the series with the first home at bat of the World Series is going to be Shohei Otani. I mean, that's crazy. It's the amount of people that are going to be watching this in Japan is, it's overwhelming, right? I mean, it's
the country's going to shut down. The country's absolutely going to shut down.
Yeah, Saturday morning and Sunday morning out there is going to be. Yeah, just people glued to this. I think how important it is for Major League Baseball. I think they've kind of already won in that regard, that the 2 biggest stars in the sport and the 2 biggest franchises in the sport are meeting in the World Series at a time when the league is very clearly trying to push itself forward, right? With all the pace of play initiatives and all this stuff. Like, there is a real calculated effort here by baseball to try to push itself more into the forefront, and it gets this opportunity, this moment where its biggest stage has its 2 biggest franchises and its 2 biggest stars. That's huge for them. I don't know that you necessarily need everything then to play. It doesn't have to be a 7-game series for this to be a great series for baseball. I just think it's already you're there by getting your 2 biggest stars on this stage.
No, and last thing before I set you loose. Outside, you alluded to it, outside of those top 4 for both of those teams, who is the MVP of this series for each team that we look at?
Yeah, like a Tommy Edman situation, right?
It's
not the guy you would have thought. It might be one of those 2 starters for the Dodgers. It just shifts so much to me if one of those guys, I don't mean shoot at both, but I mean the potential, say Flaherty just shoves. If he starts games 1, 4, and 7 and is great, I mean, golly, that's everything, right? All of a sudden the weak rotation is this great strength for them on the back of one guy. You could see him becoming the key the guy we come out of this series talking about. I mean, look, I like the way Max Muncy puts together an at bat. I grew up on National League Baseball in the 80s. I love a utility guy. Give me Tommy Edman playing 2 or 3 different positions in the course of a game. I love that. But either one of those starting pitchers feels like a real X factor for the Dodgers. For the Yankees, one big one to me may be Gleyber Torres. He wasn't very good in the first half. He's also about to become a free agent. His second half was good, and he's the guy getting on base in front of Soto and Judge.
Yeah.
If he's on base a ton and he's setting the stage for those two, and then Stanton, if they keep Stanton hitting the cleat up, he's another one that feels like we may look at as a huge factor for them. Again, a guy who at a point, there were times this season when he looked like a real weakness for the Yankees, kind of a problem. I mean, they had a real trouble most of the year getting much production out of their infield. And then they make the trade for Chisholm, and then Gleyber kind of turned it on. I think if he continues that strong second half and sort of just does his job as the table setter, that in front of that, Soto, Judge, Stanton, middle of the order. I mean, I think he's another kind of X factor that beyond the big ones that could become a huge factor in the World Series.
I have it right now as Dodgers in 7. I think, and to your point, I don't think that this series needs to go 7 games. I just think it's going to go 7 games because everyone's going to be patient with their at-bats. They're going to grind out every at-bat. It's going to be a chess match every at-bat from the pitching side as well, and the whole matchups thing. And that's why I think it's great for baseball, because it's going to showcase kind of those things and get the eyes back on it that I think it desperately needs. Chad Jennings of The Athletic, if you are not following him, go follow him immediately. He covers all of the baseball, and during the season, he does a lot of Red Sox stuff, but he's a great writer. I encourage you to follow him. Chad, my friend, thank you so much for making time to preview the series today.
Hey, no problem. Happy to be here. Thanks for doing it.
Let's do it again soon.